and welcome to episode 216 of our SAP on Azure Video Podcast. Today is October 31st, and together with Robert and Goran, we are here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
So today we continue our topics around infrastructure-related things. There are always a lot of new innovation when it comes to virtual machines, for example. We introduce new SKUs all the time. This also means that if you as a customer want to leverage and benefit from the latest and greatest innovations, you need to switch from one VM to another. So for this, we have created several scripts that help you get started. And we have Robert Biro and our own Goran Condric with us today, who talk and tell us a little more about this. So welcome to the show. Well, Robert, Goran, you're here all the time anyways. But yeah. Before we get started, Robert, you have been on the show before, but still, maybe you can quickly introduce yourself, what you do at Microsoft, and then let's dive into the topic.
Gladly. Thanks for having me. My name is Robert Biro. I am in Azure Core Engineering in the team responsible for SAP on Azure. And as an engineer, I work on a variety of topics and have been, in this case, working with Goran, trying to give the best experience together for the customers of enabling them to handle a resize in this situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. And Goran, I mean, everyone knows you, but still a few words on you about you.
Yeah, basically it's also part of the engineering, working with the customer, similar to Robert, and then trying to fill the gaps what we don't have, where we don't have an official offering maybe yet from Microsoft, and deblock the customer. And so I somehow landed into also this scripting part. I like to do it. It's kind of I can do it. So, and Robert was helping me quite a lot, what to do and how to do, and we did some, I think, good work. So
fantastic.
Yeah. So we'll sure let me just re-prepare the basically kind of some slides. Let me go into presentation mode. I was presenting in the past also some of those PowerShell commandlets that we had to move to zone availability set or the VMS Flex, and some of our management. They give some nice name, baptized with the PowerShell transformation automation modules, So I said, okay, let me use it, so we will just, is a part of the module part. We will talk just generally what those different commandlets work, just to set a little bit the stage, and the main part would actually be about the resize. So what you mentioned, it how to resize the virtual machines, which has a temp disk, to the virtual machine without temp disk. I mean, we don't have this kind of possibility to do it basically. And also I did some improvement to move to the zones where you also can resize, so it's also fitting in the context, Just a bit for the overviews. There are some of the commandlets. So the previous one, we had to move to virtual machine to the availability set, and also to move to the zone. And these kind of, these commandlets have a very long name. I guess I'm too long in Germany, so I was inspired by the long German words, Maybe I was drinking also something, just too long, So later, now I introduced the new one, like Move-AzVMToZone. I mean, it's much
but
nice.
It's the same thing, but it's a little shorter.
It's a little bit shorter and easier to read, I get dizzy, I gave up here in the middle when I came, So I guess it was full moon and maybe I drink some juice, I don't know, So anyway, the new one are much more meaningful. So meaning Move-AzVMToZone, and basically, which is another version of moving to the zone, newer, better version. And the main one, what we will talk here, is also Resize to Azure VM. Also, one of them is move to virtual machine scale set. So we still do not, the existing customer who would love to leverage the new virtual machine scale set availability scenarios, they at the moment is still the script is the easiest way to do it, right? Now, basically, there is again here, those scripts are developed for different reasons. Initially, when I was starting to work is a long time ago, we had the availability set as a high availability concept, and then we introduced the zones. So then was always the question how to move the existing SAP system easily from availability set to the zonal concept with less effort. So that was the main motivation. However, many people were also using it and are still using also to, tackle the challenges on capacity. Maybe we have capacity in one zone, not another one, and SKU in one zone, not another one, and then they would move it basically virtual machines to the correct zone or even availability set. HANA application volume groups, HANA Azure NetApp files, they're still using availability set pinning method, which is original. So availability set commandlet would be used as well. There's again another motivation is to use the new technology feature like VMSS Flex, and the newest one is what we will talk mainly here, how to resize the VM which has a temp disk to another VM SKU which has no temp disk, or other way around. Just very quickly, onboarding of these commandlets is really very easy. It's really easy. So install the PowerShell, and then install, if you're Windows, there's a link here, although it can be done also in Linux. It works on Linux as well. Install the AZ module, it's just a one command line. In the case that somebody would use Azure Portal shell, these two stuff are already pre-installed. They don't have to do it. And then one command line to install those SAP different modules, and then just another commandlet to run it. That's all, So it is I would say it is pretty simple to onboard. Yeah. Robert would just cover now, the motivation, technical or even financial part, why somebody would love to resize from VM SKU with temp disk to the no temp disk. So Robert, jump on.
You said it great, Holger, in the introduction is Azure all the time introduces new VM types. And in the past, a lot of the VMs, and this is why we talk about the temp disk scenario, a lot of the VMs have always had a temp disk, and there was no choice. Now, as time progresses, we're giving customers more choice. That means most VM families come in two flavors. They're completely identical from a compute side, but they come as disk full and diskless, or with temp disk and without temp disk on the other side. They're otherwise completely identical. So when we in engineering, we like to understand what the customer does. So when we look at the customers currently today, overall, the majority of SAP, so SAP on Azure, is running on VMs with temp disk, but it is starting to shift. And it's starting to shift for two reasons. Reason number one is obviously the cost. VMs without a temp disk, we give them to you customers cheaper. Secondly, it's customers are aligning on standards. So there is usually a corporate standard, and customers realizing for a workload like SAP, I probably don't need it. I probably don't need the temp disk. We'll talk a little bit in a sec about why we use it, but I might not need it. So basically I have a standard, I have a default, and I want my existing VM fleet resized and moved to the templates. So the cost factor already covered, but as part of this, so if a customers, and we have seen this in the past, they have an existing VM fleet for SAP, they're running on V3 VMs, D-Series V3 or MV1s and so on, and they want to upgrade, modernize that VM estate. SAP still runs, because why not? I get more performance, I get cheaper pricing probably, or same pricing, and as part of that, the discussion is the temp, no temp factor. And that really led us, those are the drivers that we see, the temp disk. Now, for use of the temp disk, just maybe we recap quickly for the audience. The use of the temp disk is really in SAP, number one, swap file, paging file. It can be used and is being used. Now, if the system is sized correctly, you should not see any paging, or at least no swap in activity. Swap out, writing to the swap file, that's what most OSs do, but you shouldn't see any actual need for the swap to be used, as in getting it into the memory. So that's the typical use case for temp disk. The second use case being the temporary databases, a SQL server, placing the temporary database, this tempdb, on the temp disk, and that is recreated in case the temp disk vanishes or on the next boot size. Mm-hmm. Some customers use it on migration disk because it's effectively a fast performing local disk from the VM perspective. It's not a remote disk. It is faster.
Yeah.
But there's always a drawback or a kind of a pros and contras. Do I really need it? And more customers are deciding, I don't need it. So we are not changing anything. We are not forcing people to move to without temp disk. There always remains the choice. What we are presenting is this, giving them an option to have to do the choice.
Yeah, and if I see there that potentially there's a 15% decrease in costs, and if I don't need the temp disk anyways, this is a fantastic offering then, of course. And I fully understand that. I might be very much interested in changing the VM size or the VM type to a VM type with the same CPU, with the same other performance or RAM memory, but without the temp disk. Makes total sense, yeah?
Absolutely. And the bottom right, those figures, those are normal calculator figures in Montrose region chosen. From what I had looked at is roughly the 15% is the extreme, but it does apply because a lot of these are used for application servers and other non-database server. Maybe the massive VMs, the 30 terabyte, 20 terabyte, 10 terabyte HANAs, you would see a minuscule saving, but saving nonetheless. It's still saving, and it adds up. If you don't really have no use for the swap file, for the page file on temp disk, and can work either without it or placed somewhere else, why not? Go for it. Now, it's a good example with the pricing. You have the price difference, but you also see the VM name difference. In this case, D8, little d, little delta, or disk full on the left box, the left blue box, with a temp disk, and on the right, the same SKU, but without temp disk. This little d is the official Azure naming for temp disk, no temp disk.
I'm just thinking D like temp disk or
disk full is the official name. I know. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Now, a bit of a recap, maybe just to because with SAP we have a certain VM families which are certified or allowed to use, and for some of these VMs there is no choice. They always have a temp disk. They always had a temp disk and will continue to have temp disk. They're really good examples are the older general compute VMs, D series, V3, V2, which are still very prevalent today and used. MV1s and several of the M series with higher memory, where we just don't see a reason to offer the customers templess or without temp. So they're just the not having the D is not a sign that the temp disk is not present. Always check the requirements from a customer perspective. Is it there? How big is it, and so on. So not having the D, it's an indicator within the family. Yes, just something to keep ahead of.
No, that's a good point. Yeah.
And maybe one more topic for the audience do I need the temp disk? And this is really important because from our perspective, from Microsoft perspective, we have no idea what's happening inside the VM. We don't see. We have no access, and that's by design. So we don't know how the VM is configured for what purpose. So if there is a company decision to go to VMs without temp disk, and I know Goran, we will speak a little bit later on that, it's very important to understand what that means for the process. Is it really used somewhere? Do I have a need for temp disk? Will my OS crash if I change over? This is something we cannot do for the customer. The customer has to really understand how is it used and maybe make configuration changes.
Mm-hmm.
If we maybe jump ahead to the next one, there's one more thing to consider. And there is one more thing to consider from the SAP on Azure certification. There is this very central node, probably known to most people who are aware of SAP on Azure, 192.8533, which spells out the support aspects for SAP on Azure. And it contains also the details about VM sizes and so on. We have described the VMs with and without temp disk. And we have a very, very important point here that if a VM without temp disk is chosen, the OS disk, the boot disk, needs to have a minimum size of 128. The reason for that, you want to have a swap file. Now, some customers maybe make a small swap disk on premium V2 disk or something small. Some customers completely eliminate it for HANA. But some might, especially for application servers where you have the biggest cost saving, they put it on the OS disk. And to combat the additional I/O requirements, we have this requirement. It's a soft requirement, certification requirement, and it's again on the customer to ensure this happens. And maybe just a little note, it's generation 1, generation 2, especially if a customer has an older estate VM fleet that they're upgrading, and they go into a templess fleet. So we allow them the resize. The newer VMs do come as generation 2 only, or we stipulate or we require the customers to use them as generation 2. All the new VMs that are coming in 2024 and beyond are going to be generation 2 for SAP workload. So it's mandated by the platform. There is one exception, which is the D series and E series. That's why it's on the slide you mentioned. It's specifically mentioned also in the SAP node that the customers for SAP on Azure must use them as generation 2. I mention it this way because the work that is, as Goran has done on the PowerShell side, does not handle generation 1 to generation 2 today. Will it change? Will there be an Azure way? We'll see. I would subscribe to the channel and find out in the future.
Yeah, you should do that.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
And yes, maybe as a quick recap. And so why this is important and why this work has done. Maybe people are wondering, okay, you have temp disk and no temp disk. You cannot resize between them. We stop. Azure stops you. There is no way to resize with a normal resize process. So you cannot take a VM, go to Azure portal or API and resize it. The platform will block you. You can resize from a VM family with temp disk to a VM family with temp disk. So from DV3 to DDV5.
Yeah.
You can do so the same way from if the source VM has no temp disk to a newer or different VM family without temp disk. Absolutely fine. But you cannot cross. You cannot cross, and that's where the scripts come in. The way to enable that, so there's no direct resize. The way to enable that is basically recreating the VM. Create a snapshot. The snapshot strips the no temp designation. From the snapshot, create a disk copy. Throw away the VM or just keep it for safekeeping if you want to, if you're fine with the different VM name, and create a new VM with or without temp disk. This way you cross the boundary. And that's what the PowerShell that Goran created really does. One command to do all these necessary steps, pre-checks, warnings, what have you, so it can be easily executed.
It also obviously means there is a downtime. I mean, for this VM, I mean, you were talking before about application servers. So maybe I anyways already have 5 application servers attached to my metric server or to my ACSS. But so then I could take one down basically, but I really need to shut down the virtual machine to do this change.
Exactly. Resize is implicitly always a downtime from a compute perspective. In this case, it just has to be a little bit more with different means, with different way. But it definitely will be a downtime. You're absolutely correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, from the runtime perspective, it's approximate time you need for this. It's kind of very similar to time you would need for the real resize from the Azure, So
okay, yeah.
Azure would do, very similar, so to say. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Goran, maybe you talk about a little bit on the details, how it works under the hood.
Exactly. So basically, there are two new PowerShell commandlets in this automation modules. The first one, the main one, is Resize-AzVM. So basically, another one is another Move-AzVM/Zone, or from one zone to another zone, is just a second version. Resize-AzVM is basically, it will just resize. So if the VM is regional, it will stay the regional. If VM is zonal one in one zone, it will stay zonal in that zone. It will just resize it, so to say.
Which might be good enough in a lot of cases. If my only concern is I want to benefit from a temp disk less virtual machine, or if I want to get rid of my temp disk, for example, then that's probably all that I need.
Exactly. So, and it's really the most less stuff that it's kind of being executed, Always in these commandlets, there's a lot of pre-checks. Pre-checks meaning VM is running, and then VM will be stopped, and then it will be deleted, and this would be snapshot recreated, VM recreated, which is downtime, right? If anything goes wrong with that recreation, which can always happen, it's not the ideal case, right? So those pre-checks are always there in order to try to check that, let's say, the new setting, the new VM SKU will support whatever we need, so that all the prerequisites are met. An example is what Robert has mentioned, the Gen 1 and Gen 2. So let's say source VM is Gen 1, but the target VM SKU supports only Gen 2. This will be checked, and if this is the case, that pre-check will say, hey, that will not work, and it will stop before the VM is stopped or before the VM is deleted. Otherwise, if I wouldn't check this and just recreate the VM, you will get the error, hey, I can't convert from Gen 1 to Gen 2, as an example.
But you just said before the VM is stopped, so I can run this while my VM is still running.
Exactly.
Cool. So this is I can just use this also to prepare to check, is it ready, or am I missing something anyway?
True. Yes.
Okay, cool.
Correct. Just few example, I don't know, if the VM has a premium disk and target VM SKU has no support for the premium disk, that will break, or that new VM SKU supports enough disk and NIC cards, because every SKU has a certain, theoretically you could downsize it as well, so lower SKU has less number of disk and less number of NIC cards, and we need to the new SKU has to match the existing disk number, existing NIC cards, different security checks and but the point is a lot of checks are there, and they will be always added in order to really make sure that everything kind of during the recreate will work, Also, what is new that I'm using a bit new approach to use the Azure ARM templates in order to collect information and recreate. In the previous one, I was collecting all the information, setting back, which is a lot of work. And things in Azure are always changing. So with the new ARM template, I'm exporting them, changing whatever I need to change, and then use those ARM template basically to deploy or redeploy the new one.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And this is also giving me opportunity. And again, if something fails, and theoretically, even if you do a lot of those checks, something can fail. Now I have ability, or I have a functionality to easily restore the VM to the previous state, So there is always a restore command. It is also printed during the runtime. You will see it, with the exact command line. And if something fails, or even not, even if it's okay, everything okay, you can roll back, let's say, to the previous state, and reasons could be different. One reason could be, the recreate doesn't work, or for some reason I want to go back, and it will do the work, and it will have all the needed information in the local folders, right? Both those commandlets can go also with the across the different subscription. Of course, assumption is that you are authenticated to do this stuff, right? And also what is important is in the generally when you recreate the VM, you're losing the VM extensions, So the previous commandlets did not have ability to restore them, meaning customer do need to do it manually. Now what I add, for example, is on, let's say, on Linux and on Windows, some of them are being restored as a post-VM creation task, So let's say SAP extended monitoring is done, or the Azure Monitor Linux agent or security agent, it's basically restored after the VM creation, And this is while you also are emphasizing a downtime, which is an important part. VM is up and running, and restore of the extension, which also takes some time, is done as a post-VM recreate step, which means it's no downtime for the system, right? For the rest of the stuff which is not recreated, there will be a warning. Okay, it's not we didn't do it, and you need to do it manually. I'm looking into option how these things could be extended, like, I don't know, maybe for the Azure backup or the Azure for the disaster recovery, but at the moment is at least some step forward, right? For another commandlet is move to the zone. Again, I had a previous commandlet, a German naming convention, a long sausage name, which is basically doing the same. However, the new one is definitely a much better alternative. So probably during the time this will be obsolete, the old one. Again, it's doing more pre-checks. It is also asking less. For example, if the VM is part of the load balancer, you don't need to specify. It will figure it out automatically and check that the load balancer are a standard one, because when you move to zones and you across the zones, you need a standard load balancer, for example. Again, also using the ARM template, meaning, again, you have also a restore ability, and also again restoring of some of those same extension. And last but not least, when you move support now for all the managed disks, so in the previous one is standard, premium V1 and V2. Now it's also the ultra, so that will be important if you move VM from one zone to another zone. All right, so you might have also V2 and ultra, and they will be also moved from one zone to another one, right? And very important, just to mention, not to forget, all those commandlets are recreating the VM, the new one and the old one as well. And that means everything else stays the same. Disk naming convention is the same, NIC are the same, they're just reattached. The VM name is the same, resource group is the same, networking association, of course, through the NIC is the same. Inside of the VM is the same, except that the unique VM ID is changed, simply because you are actually creating, from Azure perspective, a new VM, and Azure wants to track it. That unique VM ID is bound to SAP license on ABAP and Java system, meaning, okay, if the message server VM with the message server is recreated, then you would need just to reinstall the new VM license. So this is a one post-installation step. Important part that, again, current commandlet is not handling reconfiguring of the swap space, but it will give the warning that you need to do it prior the VM is stopped. Okay. Reason is simply this is inside of the VM, and you never know what customer will love, how they would love to do it. Robert mentioned they might use the OS disk if they have space, or they maybe even might want to add a new disk, and just configure for the space, swap space, So
or SQL Server, the temp, you might have a static configuration for the D drive. Hey,
exactly,
the D drive
that's
is
a
gone.
good idea as well. Yeah. So you need to reconfigure, but the script prior to stopping of the VM will just throw a warning, hey, you need to do it, and just please do it before you continue, Yeah, and okay, some of the VM extension are not restored, some of they are, So let me just kind of then jump quickly to the demo. I will just, this is the one regional VM, I believe. It is the E8S. Here we also have an S. Again, what Robert mentioned, it doesn't mean that it's not having a temp disk. So this one has a temp disk, correct?
Yeah.
And I would love to resize, for example, to the standard E8S, and this one has no temp disk. If you check the local storage, no local storage present. So meaning it has no temp disk. VM has I don't know, it has few 2 disks maybe as an example, and it has some extensions. Actually, I believe it is. Let me check. It should be, yeah. These are 4 extensions. This one is actually not covered by the commandlet.
Okay.
So let me just go it here. This would be. I'm currently in the folder which is empty, so everything here will be kind of all the logs will be placed here. And I'm starting just the Resize-AzVM. I'm specifying resource group name, VM name, and the new SKU. All right.
Can you zoom in, Goran, for the font for the
yes,
channel a little bit? This font.
Yes, maybe
that's awesome.
Just do like this. Let me know if this is a big enough, or shall I?
I think that's good. Yeah.
All right. So I'm just specifying the new VM SKU size. So also one additional stuff I just improved, that everything will be logged in a log disk. So if something is just in a local folder here. So if something doesn't work, they would generally share it's easier to share the log text file than copy the output of the stuff. So it will also do a little bit more, check the local PowerShell environment, just to know we do have everything, whatever we need. All the Azure and PowerShell environment and the AZ module, and that's of course will always will be helpful for the troubleshooting. And now it's starting actually, it's starting the pre-checks part. Again, pre-checks could be also executed separately if somebody wants, but in this at this point of time, I'm also not, and it's also now telling, it's also, that was a suggestion from the Robert. It will say, this VM is original VM put in availability set. On the availability set, there is a PPG. So PPG is always can create sometimes challenges with the capacity. So here will be also said, hey, you do have a PPG, and during the recreate that could cause you an issue. It would be nice you can remove it before you proceed. Okay, it will stop before it will ask before the stopping. However, we also have a option, because we're also a little bit moving away from the PPG as an optional parameter to say remove the PPG, and that will be then just gone. And here is then checking the target VM SKU is available in region. In the context of the zone, is it really also available in the zone? Generally speaking, it will check here the Hyper-V. Here's checking the Hyper-V generation. So the source generation of the current generation is V2, and the new SKU supports the V2. Otherwise, it would fail. Checking the premium disk, is it has or not, and then it's also checking that the target VM SKU it has, and it will check also that the target VM SKU does do the support is supporting the premium disk. Otherwise, it would fail during the recreate process. So this will take maybe just a minute or so. I'm just
the source VM is running, maybe just to confirm.
The source
as well.
VM is currently the source VM is running. Yeah, it's also it says target VM supports the premium V disk, and it's now checking that we have it has VM currently 2 data disk, and the new VM SKU supports 16. Okay, we are good to go. the new SKUs, that's fine, and it's doing the same check for the NIC card. Okay, we have just one NIC card, and the new SKU supports 4 NICs card. Okay, we are good to go. Doing also with the security, trusted launching, few of those kind of stuff, and now it's going also in the checks of the temp, no temp disk, and it says okay. The source is with temp, and the targets it's do not support the temp disk, and then it will just throw the warning, hey, in the case you're changing, you would lose the paging, and then it is also highly recommended to reconfigure always paging prior. Now it will stop, and then will ask you to confirm the stopping. Okay, I will just continue it. If somebody wants to run everything before the asking of stop, asking confirmation for the VM deletion, there is a dash force as a typical in a PowerShell, which will run through without any confirmation. And maybe this is something what some customer might want to use in a full end-to-end automation, so to say. Of course, it doesn't something work, it will, or checks doesn't work, it will break and it will stop and it will say. So it will stop the VM, and then it will do or in this case, just the OS disk snapshot, delete the OS disk simply to free the name, because this name is unique. It's checking for the, and then it will actually create a new OS disk from a snapshot and actually recreate the VM from a template. Now it's also exporting the ARM template, and those ARM template would be adjusted. So that's, I think, much more easier for him to implement this.
It's
kind
easier
of
also troubleshooting as well, Goran. I hope at least for the audience is better that you have a lot of logs and files in case things don't go as planned for whatever reason. You can always understand it's not just a monolithic command that does things.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also enable us to do a restore in a much easier way. The whole stuff. Okay, here says the export of the ARM, they don't support, generally speaking, many of the extensions, but nevertheless, I'm doing a bit later, right? And
maybe talk about a little bit on the extensions and why they're important. Because it is a recreate procedure. So when you normally resize VMs in Azure, we keep everything. Everything stays the same. That's the normal resize. So there's no worry about the extensions, about tags. By the way, Goran's script, in this case, the VM is recreated, meaning the new VM is stripped of all the extensions, all the tags. What is possible? I think you have 4 or 3 extensions, Goran, which you cover, which we believe are working without any additional configuration. But if you have additional extensions which are not covered, those need to be afterwards handled by the customer. It is, for instance, backup is a perfect example. Even because when the VM is recreated, like in this case, it needs to be re-registered for backup.
Right. And exactly. So basically the VM is now recreated, and it's also printing the time, okay, that's the full VM downtime from stopping to recreation until it comes. And now it's restoring.
Now you're doing the extensions.
So if I would just go to the
VM is there now, right? The new
VM
one.
is there, should be there, yes.
Cool.
I think I just need to refresh it sometimes on the page itself. And it says it's E5. All right, it is E5, and then if you go to the extension, it's just creating one by one. So currently on the SAP extended monitoring,
we have already
at the moment, but the point is VM is now up and running. So it's always, if I would try to do this inside of the ARM template, it would prolong the VM creation. And therefore, just to speed up or limit the downtime, I'm doing as opposed steps. And downtime, you're right, Holger, it's always, in the SAP system, it's always critical. And you mentioned a good point. If they have a high availability system, they are really even productively. Those high availability system are extremely helpful. Also, not just for the unplanned downtime, but also for the planned downtime. And this is the planned downtime because they have clusters. So one is up and running, the another one is converted. So to say, you can execute these operations of the resize and recreate or move into the zones, whatever, on a live system without basically almost no downtime, So patient is awake and you do it, doesn't hurt him.
Let's do a refresh here. Maybe we already have another extension.
Yes, so it's just going, came to this one is done and came to this one and said, okay, this is not supported. You need to reconfigure it manually.
Okay,
it will tell you you're right. And then it's going for the monitoring other extensions, just completely, and basically in a minute or two it will finish. I was just trying. Okay, we don't have. One more. Probably we wouldn't have time. It's not so important, but there is also, you see, during when it recreate start, it said if the VM recreate phase or if you want to roll back the original VM SKU, you can restore it by running this command, and then it tells you exactly, okay, this is the commandlet, resource group name, exactly the group name and the VM name, and you just copy it and run it, and it will just go through the backward process. Basically similar approach, but just will go back, and you can just restore it in an easy way. I guess we don't have much time, but in principle, it would look similar. It would look the same. And this is sometimes also very helpful. Again, if you run on a production and for some reason something doesn't work, it might be helpful. It is helpful, actually. There was a request to have an easy way to restore it back, And one reason, I think I have the last slide, which is important, why something can go wrong. Capacity could be the reason, It might be that there is no capacity, especially with those bigger VM. We don't have ability to programmatically check this at the moment. So meaning this recreate could fail because, I don't have a capacity, Now, what we often do also in a customer project is basically kind of tricking the stuff. It's a simple trick. A customer deploys a dummy VM of the desired SKU in the desired region, zone, whatever, same subscription, same resource group, same VNet. If that works, there is a capacity, and then just prior to starting the commandlet, they can delete the VM or stop the VM, meaning that would release the capacity, and then they run the commandlet, and there's a high probability that would work. Generally, might be the case with some really very, very high SKU VMs, M835, they are monsters, which are not so always easily like those generic one. But it's always, if you want to be sure, it is always, let's say, kind of a good practice, just deploy a dummy VM. If it works, it's there, then just delete it and run the resize, So here it's finished
now.
Okay, it's finished. So I will just start here. We don't have to wait, but basically it will just start now restoring process back. It will figure it out. There is a VM. Okay, do you want to delete it? And it will, because the VM exists. In the case that VM recreate fails for whatever reason, maybe there is no capacity, VMs would not be there, and it would just, it wouldn't ask you anything. It will just, it wouldn't ask you for confirmation for the deletion like now, because it doesn't exist, but it will just roll back. It will roll back and restore the VM in a previous state, and it will use all the information which are exported and available in a local folder, and use the snapshot to again restore it back, so to say.
And as you said, so the reason why it is possible to restore is because you had locally saved this -restore.json file.
Correct. So if I
Okay,
would
yeah.
go just a second, if I would go and resize the Azure VM, so now you see there are different
Yeah, perfect.
JSON
Yeah.
file and configuration file, which are basically used during also the restored
Great.
stuff. So let me not go inside just to not make the people dizzy, but basically they are kind of used here, and all the information are there, including the extension as well. So extension will be also, I mean, the one which are supported would be restored, so to say. So meaning some of them might be lost, okay? And again, restore also mean, again, here is also recreate of the VM, meaning a new VM ID. So again,
even though it's a restore,
yeah,
I still have
yes,
a different unique ID, which means
See-
I need to still apply for a new SAP
you
license.
still need to apply because you start to resize,
Yeah.
let's say it doesn't
Yeah.
work, VM is gone, is deleted.
Yeah.
Now you're restoring, meaning again, recreating in a previous
Makes
SKU
sense.
side, new VM creation, so new VM ID. Again, it's still they need to apply for the new license, right? So basically here is just, yeah, it's already, I think yeah, it's done the resize. If I would, and it's doing now again restoring the extension. And if I would just go to the VM, and if I would refresh it, so now shouldn't be a V5 again, maybe on the top.
Restore being quicker because there's
the-
less checks to be done, so it is
Yeah,
from
so
an execution perspective easier.
it's V3.
And now we are V3.
It's
Yeah.
the old SKU size, right? So
Okay.
I'm back again, you know. So
Nice.
yeah. So people are using a lot. Customers are using this kind of a lot. Also move the zone across the zones and left and right, and that have some ability, flexibility is helpful. It's helpful to
Cool.
tackle the different information. Yeah. I think
Thank
we
you.
are.
I think that's really powerful. Yeah.
We are. Yeah, it's a PowerShell. It has to be powerful, you know. And I believe we'll soon publish the blog. I don't have it yet, Robert, myself, so we can add it later also additionally.
But the PowerShell commands are in the gallery.
PowerShell commands are in the gallery.
Okay.
Yeah, so just again, maybe just quickly, when you install the PowerShell, when you install the PowerShell library, you can move resize. You can always use. I mean, again, it's always there is a help which is implemented. You know, it's a Microsoft style, user friendly. You know, so
examples too. I think
examples describe what is actually how it looks like the commandlet structure, what is obligatory, which are optional parameters, and it give you also the examples of how you can do it. So come on, don't embarrass me now, you know.
Okay, but on top of this, you are also working on publishing a blog post that outlines
exactly
the steps. Okay.
Exactly. So here again, it's always good stuff. When you install it again, you have here say, okay, this is a must. Virtual main name is a must. New SKU it's a must, and these are optional parameters. Force is again, and it describes what is actually doing it. And again, as Robert mentioned, there are also examples, you know, so
nice. Okay.
changing to the new SKU and then doing without the confirmation, you just do a dash force, you know, and also it's also, using another subscription as well, for example, subscription ID, if you don't want to use the default one. So basically a kind of enough documentation is there by default in all those kind of commandlets. What people love blogs and pictures when we will do it.
And videos now.
And videos. Yeah, it's always more live. It's more live. Yeah.
Perfect.
So that would be all for
Robert, Goran, thank you so much. I think that was really great. Some great things that customers can leverage. I'm sure this will be used very much by customers.
It is already used. It is already used quite a lot by the big customer already in a productive living system. M3 800 something crazy numbers. It's being used. Yeah.
Wow.
it's being used. So I mean, it is still it is just not to forget, it is an open source. There is no official support, although we do the best to assist customers as much as we can. It's always definitely a must to have a tested backup restore procedure. I mean, this is, even if we are saving those snapshot of the disk, they are not being removed from those snapshot. You can recreate the disk in some way. This is all nice, but still, customer must have a tested backup restore procedure,
always.
Because this is not a replacement, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
And under the hood, it's just normal Azure API, so it is still fully supported and everything else. So, and I think hopefully the log files and the JSONs makes it, in a really extreme case, a support case, easy to understand for the customer and everybody else.
To see exactly what happened, and then
exactly.
Nice.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so good. Thank you again, Robert. It was great to see you again, and I'm looking forward to see you again on our show. And Goran, we'll talk again next week anyways.
Next week, yes. Now I'll switch the role and heads.
Exactly. Perfect. Thanks you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.